This is a sports catastrophe production. Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another sports catastrophe on this day. And on this day, December 28th, 2008, the Detroit Lions did something that was unprecedented in NFL history. They went donut and 16. Now you'll be thinking to yourself, Cutter, you're wrong, because didn't the 76 Tampa Bay Buccaneers go winless? Yes, but in 1976, they played a 14-game schedule, whereas in 1978, it got expanded to 16, and now we're at 17. So I'm thinking, so technically you would be right, but maybe Tampa does win one of the two games that they didn't do. So anyway, this was the 75th season in Detroit Lions history, and you know the Lions have a rich history. Unfortunately, in the Super Bowl era, they have been pathetic. They've only had one playoff win in their history, only one. And that was against a young Dallas Cowboys team at the Silverdome in 1992 when the Lions were the 1991 NFC Central champs. But anyhow, they were 0-16. Rod Marinelli was in his third season as being head coach, and they were undefeated in the preseason. And they had won 7 games, which was their best in 8 years. So it looked pretty good for them. The Lions suffered. They were 0-16. They were only the second team since the AFL-NFL merger to finish a season winless. The Lions gave up 517 points that season. That's amazing. But the thing was, that was not actually an NFL record. No, that record belonged to the 1981 Baltimore Colts, who I think won 2 games that year, didn't they? 1 or 2 games, but they gave up 533 points, but they at least won a game. 32.31 points per game given up. That was third worst of any team since the 1960s. The 1966 Giants and the 1981 Colts were worse than them. Wow. But here's the funny thing. The 2020 team gave up 519 points. And they won 3 games, which is funny. How they gave up more points than the winless team. Matt Millen, who was the president, GM, and CEO, who was brought from the Fox broadcasting booth, was fired in week 4. About freaking time. And of course, Marinelli survived the whole year, which was weird, but he was fired at the end of the year. The Lions would wear a special throwback replica of their 1934 jerseys as the Detroit Lions for 2 games. They were pretty cool. You usually sell them on Thanksgiving Day and all that. So they got rid of their black alternate jersey and all that. So anyway, yeah. The Lions suffered terribly and all that. The city of Detroit was suffering massively. There was a worldwide recession, and the automobile industry and the city of Detroit were really down and out and all that. Despite the fact that the Red Wings were still doing pretty well in hockey, the Tigers, not so bad, but the Pistons were not really doing as well. So the city of Detroit needs something. So the Lions would trade Sean Rogers to Cleveland before the season started for Lee Bowden and a third-round pick, who they use on a defensive tackle. In the 2008 draft, they didn't take anyone huge. Well, Cliff Averill was taken in the 3rd round, a defensive end from Purdue. Unfortunately, they had issues. First-round pick Guster Cheerlius, an offensive tackle from Boston College, was in a bar fight and sentenced to 1-year probation, although he would be part of the starting offensive tackle line in week 3. Second-round pick Jordan Dyson was arrested and charged with drunk driving prior to the NFL draft. And Caleb Campbell couldn't play in the NFL for 2 years because he comes from Army, and that's the rule. So anyway, it doesn't matter. So the Ford family were hoping for something good. They beat the Giants, Bengals, Browns, and Bills in preseason. No big deal. But then the season started. Week 1, they were in Atlanta. And this was Matt Ryan's first start as an Atlanta Falcon. Well, that went as poorly as he thought. Falcons scored 21 points in the first quarter to win 34-21. But the great Matt Vasgersian being the play-by-play guy. Week 2, Vasgersian did another game. Detroit were home opener against Green Bay, and it didn't go so well, especially the fourth quarter, giving up 24 points. They lose 48-26. Week 3, Dick Stockton took over for Fox. They went to San Francisco, sunny San Francisco, and would face JT O'Sullivan. Well, would face Mike Martz, who became the offensive coordinator of San Fran, and JT O'Sullivan became the Niners starting quarterback when Detroit got rid of him. And they won 31-13. So, yeah, there were a lot of problems with Matt Millen. He did well as a linebacker, and then he went to be a color commentary studio analyst for all 3 NFL networks, CBS, Fox, and NBC. But unfortunately, fans were not too happy. I mean, the team was 31-84 under Matt Millen, so they finally fired him during the bye week. Week 5, they hosted Chicago. Vasgersian was back on the mic, and the Bears won 34-7. Week 6, they go to Minnesota. Ron Pitts became the guy. And unfortunately for him, well, the Vikings won 12-10, but those 2 points were critical because that was the first quarter when Dan Orlovsky ran along the back of the end zone trying to find a receiver. Only problem was he ran onto the white area, which is out of bounds, and that's a safety. Can you believe that move? So anyway, the Lions would then trade Roy Williams, their supposed to be talented wide receiver, to Dallas for first, third, and sixth round picks in the 2009 draft. He looked good and all that. The Lions needed draft potential, and the Cowboys could use Roy Williams for a playoff run. Unfortunately, John Kidna would be placed on injured reserve because of his chronic back pain. Detroit would then trade John Kidna to the Cowboys for a cornerback. Week 7 in Houston, Chris Rose became the play-by-play guy for Fox, which is like, Chris Rose, really? He did okay, but the Texans did win 28-21. The Lions were close. In Week 8 against the Skins, Tom Brenneman became the Fox guy. And the Skins won 25-17. Unfortunately, Detroit fans couldn't watch the game because they failed to sell out the stadium. And so that meant Detroit fans couldn't watch their games in the Michigan area. Washington won the game 25-17. However, the Detroit Lions had a good move. They got Dante Culpepper, who seemed to be a very good quarterback. And if he could get back to the way he was with Minnesota, they would be in no problems at all. Unfortunately, though, he suffered a shoulder injury and only played 4 games for the Lions. Week 9, Sam Rosen. I'm in Toronto. Sorry, if you're a Bouchard Underground fan, you would know that reference. But the Bears and the Lions put up 23 points in the second quarter. They were up 23-13 at the half. They were up 23-20 after 3 quarters. Could the Lions actually win a game and avoid going 0-8? Nope, they missed. The Lions tried, but they failed. They only scored 23 points in that second quarter. The Lions were now the only team not to win a game in the NFL. So they would face Jacksonville. And for the first time, CBS would broadcast that game, a Lions game. Kevin Harlan and Rich Gannon were in Detroit, and Jacksonville crushed them. 21 points in the second quarter, 38-14. Week 11 in Carolina, Ron Pitts was back being the play-by-play guy, and the Lions lost 31-22. Week 12, they hosted Tampa. Ron Pitts was the guy. Of course, because Detroit couldn't sell out, they couldn't get the game locally. And the Bucs won 38-20. Week 13 saw the Thanksgiving Day game. CBS, Nance and Sims, the big boys, were coming to town. Titans, Lions. Well, it was a disaster. The Titans were 10-1 headed into this game. And they proved it, scoring not 3, but 5 touchdowns in the first half, leading 35-10. So, anyway, it was huge. But the Lions just got crushed 47-10 in that game. The Lions, that was the most points they've given up on Thanksgiving Day in history. And that made the Lions the second straight team to go 0-12 after the Dolphins did so in 2007. Then they would host the Vikings with Sam Rosen. I'm in Toronto. No, you're not, Sam. You're in Detroit doing the play-by-play. So Culpepper was hoping for something. It was a close game. The Lions were up by a field goal after 3 quarters. It looked good for them. Hanson made a field goal, but then after Longwell kicked a 50-yard field goal, it worked. And it didn't work out. And the final score was 20-16 Vikings. And in Indianapolis on Fox, Tom Brenneman was the main guy, and the Colts won 31-21. And that one. So that meant the Lions became the third team to start 0-14 in regular season. Although the 76 Bucs would stay at 0-14 because that was the length of their season. The 1980 Saints would, if memory serves me correctly, win the next week against the Jets at Shea Stadium. So yeah, the Lions just couldn't believe their luck. They were 0-14, although they wouldn't be the last team to start 0-14. But anyway, then they hosted the Saints. Ron Pitts was the main man. Play. And the Saints crushed the Lions at Define Powder 42-7. 2 touchdowns in each of the first 3 quarters. Basically, they didn't need their stars for the 4th quarter, and Detroit couldn't score off of them. The Lions were 0-15. They became the second team to lose 15 straight in a single season. Now, if you're thinking, hang on a minute, if I said they're the first team to be 0-15, then how come you said 15 straight losses? Well, the 2001 Carolina Panthers won on opening day, but then lost the next 15 games. It's 16-game schedule, so they lost 15 straight. So now we come to this game. At Lambeau Field, Chris Rose, John Lynch, and Krista Thada would be doing the games. And the Lions scored 21 points. The only problem was the first and 4th quarters. Detroit had not beaten the Packers in Green Bay since 1991. That's amazing. And, well, Deshaun Wynn got a touchdown run for the Packers, and Jermichael Finley got a touchdown pass, 14-0. Megatron Calvin Johnson got a touchdown pass. And then Calvin Johnson got a touchdown. It was 14-14. It was like, oh my God, they're going to do it. Mason Crosby kicked the field goal, no big deal. And then John Kudnik got a touchdown catch. The Lions got a touchdown run. But after Donald Driver caught a 71-yard touchdown pass, game, set, match, the Lions lose and fell to 0-16. Well, the Lions fired Ron Marinelli. Well, of course he would fire your head coach after an 0-16 season. Are you nuts? Everyone was fired. The Lions were lucky to have the number 1 pick, and they took Matthew Stafford. It actually worked out for the Lions because Detroit had a star quarterback and all that. Unfortunately, a few years later, Megatron, aka Calvin Johnson, would retire unexpectedly at the prime of his career, which shocked a lot of people. But that wasn't the first time Detroit did that. It was a guy from Detroit did that. Barry Sanders did that, so much so too. And allegedly, they were supposed to. The 2008 season was supposed to be the end of the 50-year curse that Bobby Lane put on the Lions franchise because, Lane got traded from Detroit to Pittsburgh in 58 and put a hex saying Detroit will not have anything for 50 seasons. Although it was a hoax because Lane said, I never said that. But anyway, yeah, it was amazing. The Lions had lost 23 of their last 24 games going back to the previous season. So the NFL Network named it the number 1 worst team of all time, even worse than the 1976 Bucs. I don't know, maybe. But anyway, yeah, Calvin Johnson actually caught 12 receiving touchdowns, tying Larry Fitzgerald for the NFL lead and all that. Megatron stayed on and all that. Anyway. Yeah, it was just amazing. The last member of the 2008 Lions squad to play in the NFL was Don Mulbach, who retired after the 2020 season. So yeah, that was just amazing and all that. Well, the 2017 Browns will probably be a new video. When did they play Week 17? December 31st. Oh man, I can't do the 2017 Cleveland Browns because guess what else? There's one event on December 31st I did not do. Well, last year I did the Roberto Clemente death. This year, I'm doing for December 31st. I'm doing the Montreal Soviet Union game from 1975. Ah well, can't win them all. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond.